you watched my previous video, I did an installation of a trailer hitch wiring harness, and I ran into an issue at the end when I was testing that my brake lights weren't working. I ruled out the wiring harness being an issue, so I have some other problem with my brake circuit. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to properly troubleshoot if your brake lights aren't working. I'm going to start with the easiest things first. First thing I'm going to do is check the fuse box. Fuse box will be found right there. I've checked the fuses, they're all good. Checked my hazards, they're working just fine. Turn signals work. So I'll go on to checking the next thing in line. All right, the next thing that I'm going to be checking is the output from the stop lamp switch. According to the service manual, circuit A6 from fuse 3 in the power distribution center supplies voltage to the fuse block's bus bar. The bus bar powers circuit F32 through fuse 3 in the fuse block, and circuit F32 connects to the stop lamp switch. When the operator depresses the brake pedal, the stop lamp switch closes and connects circuit F32 to circuit L50. Circuit L50 connects to the auxiliary brake light lamps and the turn signal hazard flashers. All right, so my next step is now to test the brake light switch. There's no real easy way to get to it. Tried removing, sorry about the shaky camera. Tried removing gauge cluster to get access to it. It's back in there. It's going to be hard to see because it's really deep in there, sitting kind of on top of the steering column. It's very difficult to get to from underneath on mine because I have the AC, which blocks a lot of the access to get underneath of there. I'm not able to get to it that way, unfortunately, after removing the gauges. So what I'm going to have to do is remove my seat just so I can get in here and stick my head under there and get access to it that way. Seems like a lot to do to get access to a switch just to test it, but really the seat's only 4 bolts, so it's not that hard to remove. Okay, so I got this switch unplugged. You can get a better shot of the connector coming off of the switch from underneath. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. Just sprayed it down with some contact cleaner. Now I'm going to run my tests with the ohm meter. This is the other side of the connector. I'm going to spray some contact cleaner in here. I'm in a difficult position, so I don't think I'm going to be able to hold the camera while I'm doing this. Let me see if I can position it. If not, I'll just run through the tests. All right, so I was able to get this switch removed. Here it is here. How I was able to remove it was using 2 hands, one up on this side of the steering wheel or on the steering column, and I put my other hand over on this side. That way I can put pressure on each side of the switch like this and just wiggled it back and forth and it pops right out. There's no screws or anything like that that hold it into place. It's just kind of wedged in there on these threads. All right, so this is what the switch looks like once it's removed. So I figured I would remove this switch to show you the test procedures. It'd be easier to show here on my desk than having it in the Jeep. This switch tested good. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it back in the Jeep and try to move on to the next section and figure out where my issue is. And the way that this mounts into the Jeep, there's no bolts or anything that hold this in, even though it looks like it has threads. There's nothing that threads onto that. Basically just pushes in and pulls out. You just have to kind of wiggle it back and forth and it'll pull out. Some Jeeps that have different options will have additional wires in this connector. Mine only has 4. This test procedure that I'm going to go over is for connectors that have all 6 wires. There's just an additional 2 at the bottom. There's I think a blue, a dark blue with a red stripe, and a yellow with a red stripe. So the first test, while the brake pedal is released, meaning that this is depressed, there should be continuity between the black and the white with pink stripe wires. This is when the pedal is released. So this should be depressed. So that's good. So I have continuity there where I'm supposed to. So this is when the brake's pressed. This is when the brake's released. So there's continuity when the brake's released. So that's good. So then the next step says that there should be continuity between the yellow with red and the dark blue with red. Also, when the brake pedal is released, which means this will be depressed. Those 2 wires I don't have in my connector, so I'm not going to run that test. I'm going to skip to the next one. So the next one is there should be no continuity between pink and white wires, which are the bottom 2 wires on my connector, pink and white. So there's no continuity between the pink and white wires when the brake pedal is released, meaning this is pressed. I release it, and there is continuity. So both of those have passed. Okay, so this is the wiring diagram from the service manual. So we got the battery. This is the power distribution center. So these are the fuses that are located right next to your battery. So fuse 3, 50 amp in the power distribution center. Okay, it's gonna power the fuse block, which is the fuses inside the tub by the emergency brake. Okay, so that's powered by fuse 3 in the power distribution block, and then fuse 3 in the fuse block powers circuit F32, which is going to be the circuit that powers the brake light switch. So what I'm going to do is scroll down to the next diagram here. So now we have F32. Okay, so this is coming from the fuse box in the tub. This is the connector that connects to the stop lamp switch. So that's what we were testing. So this is pink and dB. I don't know if that's dark blue, dark brown. I'm not sure what that means. When I look at the wires, I'll be able to tell. So that's going to be the power going into the switch and provide power through the white wire through the L50 circuit. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to check this F32 circuit output. So I'm going to check and see if I have power there. If that tests good, then I'm going to check to see if I have power on the other end when the switch is depressed. All right, so here's the connector. So this is pink with dark blue. So that's the feed from the fuse box. So I'm going to check that to see if I've got power there. All right, so we're good. So I've got power there. All right, so the next point that I have to check is the connector that feeds the turn signal switch, the turn signal circuit, and the hazard circuit. And that is this connector right here. Got 11 wires on it. This is that white with tan wire that comes right from the brake light switch, runs through that connector. So I'm going to check those points when the brake pedal is depressed. All right, it's hard to see that connector, but the wire is right there in the bottom. That white wire. It's white with the tan stripe. So that goes into the turn signal switch, and that tested good when I depressed the brake pedal. That has 12 volts. So we tested the output from the stop lamp switch on the white and tan wire here. This actually goes to the turn signal switch, and that's where we just performed the test. We know that it's good there. So I'm going to scroll down to that diagram that goes off the page and then comes in right here. Follow that here, goes up and around, and then goes into the turn signal switch. So the next thing we want to do is we want to test the outputs of this turn signal switch. And I have a pretty good feeling that the turn signal switch is bad. That's where the breakdown is. So where we want to test next is right here, L62 and L63. We're going to test it on connector C218, which is the same connector where we tested the white tan wire. That's that long 10 or 11 pin connector, is a long flat connector right under the steering column. So we're going to check these two wires. So it looks like dark green and red is one wire, and brown and red is the other wire. This is the connector where I'm going to be checking my voltages. So this bottom wire is the white with the tan wire. It's the one that comes from the brake pedal switch. So I'm going to check that again just to make sure that I have the voltage there. And then once I confirm that I have voltage there and the brake pedal is depressed, then I'm going to go on to check the next two, which are, as I mentioned earlier, going to be the dark green with the red stripe and brown with the red stripe. So I'm going to check them with the voltmeter. When the brake pedal is depressed, I should have voltage there. All right, so I'm going to run a quick test again on the input, which is the white with tan. That's the input to the turn signal switch. All right, so we have 12 volts at the white with tan input to the turn signal switch when I depress the brake. So that's working as it should. All right, so let's test the next one. This is the output. Okay, there we go. So in the output, I'm also getting voltage. That's for the right side. Now let's check the other side. The other side's good too. I depressed the brake. All right, so I thought that the breakdown was going to be at the turn signal switch, but apparently it's not, because voltage is passing through the turn signal switch. So now we'll move on to the next thing down the line, which I think is just connectors. So that was a lot of work to track down a dirty connector, but sometimes that's what you have to do. So it ended up being the C218 connector from the steering column to the wire harness. Just had some dirty contacts. Took it apart, cleaned them out. When I plugged it back up, everything worked. So did I get lucky? I don't know, it's a lot of work to have to do. So I don't know if I call it lucky, but we're able to figure it out. And I don't think that there were any other components further down the line other than more connectors. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like the content that I provide. If you don't, Leave me a message in the comment and let me know how I can improve. Thanks again.